And friends on Zoom, a very, very warm afternoon. Welcome to you all to our Lunch and Learn series, which is called the Engage Scholarship Lunch and Learn series. My name is Anish, and my role in the Office of Outreach and Engagement has taught me, working with faculty, students, and staff, the importance of connections to help us mutually grow for the benefit of the campus and also our communities. And I hope today's day with our specialist speakers gives you a basic understanding of how our office functions and how there are exemplars existing on this campus that some of us can model, whether we're graduate students, whether we are faculty, whether we are staff, or whether we just have a heart to do for the community. I represent visionaries from the Office of Outreach and Engagement, and let me start by thanking Lindsay and the team for putting this together. We really appreciate all that you'll do for our office and the communities. So a few quotes that have stood out for me. One was said by the legendary Gautam Buddha, is if you knew what I know about the power of giving, you would not let a single meal pass without sharing it in some way. And we're happy to share our meal with you today with the hope that someday we can share our meal with the rest of the communities in and around our campus. Also, Theodore Roosevelt once said that this country will not be a good place for any of us to live in unless we make it a good place for all of us to live in. And that is the power of community connections and community partnerships. And what makes it special is how we build connections. And Paulina and I were saying some of the best ways to have a connection, and like Mallory said, is it starts with a handshake and maybe a cup of coffee. I know this looks like a little ugly piece of container on my desk, but this was a muffin baked for me by one of my class students last week, just because my wife's pregnant and she said, I really hope this muffin makes your day. And between last week and this weekend, she and I continued our interactions, and now she and I are writing a project for the community because of her will to do for others. So it might start with a muffin, with a handshake or a coffee, or it may just start with an opportunity for us to lunch and learn. All right, so let me get you started. Our first presenter, her name's Mallory Prucha, and she's an associate professor of costume design and technology for the TTU School of Theatre and Dance. She serves as the SOTD Associate Director of Academic Affairs and Curricula, the Associate Head of Design, and the TCVPA Coordinator of Strategic Initiatives. In addition to working as a freelance costume designer and fine artist, she also works as a composite sketch artist for law enforcement, professional sidewalk chalk artist, and dabbles in currency design. Mind you, she'll remember each of your faces before you plan. This presentation documents the project central to her research and creative activity and has been integral in her receipt of the Chancellor's Award for Research Excellence and the Presidential Award for Excellence in Engaged Scholarship. With a room full of representatives, my friends, or faculty, students, and staff, let's understand the power, influence, need, and mutual reciprocity of building and maintaining community partnerships through Mallory.
Hello, everybody. I have to first say, you might not be clapping in a moment. I apologize. This is not real. So as you're eating your delicious lunches and seeing my presentation, I'm really sorry, and it's not real. It's usually cherry flavored. When you see it, you'll know what I mean in a moment. As I kind of scroll through some slides. But it's really an honor to be able to join you all today to talk about one of my many strange research interests and or pieces of my agenda. In my everyday life, I am a theater person, and I make things with a group of other people who are immensely curious, and it's our job to sort of curate human narrative and human experience. And my sort of role in that is as somebody who dresses people up for a living. And so there's a little bit of this connection that you'll see in terms of discipline. But this idea of storytelling and playing pretend and bringing things to life in the most lifelike, but not completely, because there's no harm being done in any of these photos for real, is something that's really important to me, as well as using the transformative power of art making to make a larger impact, not just within my traditional sort of venue, which is the box. So what I'm going to share with you today is not one, but actually a series of 4 collaborative events that happen over the course of the year that fold in different aspects of my research, and it's fondly known as disaster days. So my research is an absolute disaster, but the impact it makes is one that helps elevate community. Where am I clicking to? Should be the TV. technology's not my thing.
Sorry, we're having some Zoom issues.
Give you a little dance for you. Little dance.
So Mallory sets up, it's really important for some of us to position ourselves in this room today and understand this from your perspective, whether you're a student, faculty, or staff, is how can community partnerships assist us to advance our learnings as a student, as a faculty or staff? So Mallory is obviously speaking from the angle of a faculty, but I'm sure as a student myself and now playing the role of faculty and the staff, there's so many different connections that can help us build our resumes. And I'm done with my Philip.
Oh, no, that was great. All right. This partnership, and which does fold in all elements of faculty, additional researchers, interdisciplinary research, and various different communities, began with a donut. And I think that, you know, coming into an R1 academic environment, I'm like, I have to have a research agenda. What's that? And how am I going to make a bigger or broader impact? And it actually started with a donut. I was having a conversation actually prior to being at Tech with a group of individuals who are paramedics and fire scientists, and they said, "Hey, you're a theater person. What does that mean?" He said, "I said, yeah." And they said, "Right." And they looked at the donut and they said, "I bet you can make something really disgusting out of it." And then they invited me to a series of their training exercise parties to help use my craft, which sometimes is a makeup artist and a costume designer, a playwright, a stage manager, to help elevate the quality of the simulation exercises that they were providing for their community stakeholders. When I came to Texas Tech, having had some of this experience, I was in COVID-19, and I didn't receive a donut, but I did receive an outreach from TCVPA Professional Education, which serves a primary mission of finding ways to connect different aspects of the medical professions in order to augment training and collaboration, or in some various other sort of purposeful exercises. And they said, "Hey, you know, you've done this strange thing." And I told them the funny story about the donut, and they invited me to a conversation with the donut. And they said, "We think that you might have some knowledge and some information and some skills that are really unique, and we want to see what the possibilities are." And for building any community partnership or creating an engaged relationship, I think that that is a central thing to keep in mind, is always to keep possibility in the forefront, knowing that whatever you may see as your own sort of strange or non-connected skills, that there will be an application and envision even larger. As I go through this presentation, I'm going to actually not just show you a little bit about Disaster Day, but the larger implications of how what started as a small connection on what our first exercise was a fake tornado held out at the American Windmill Museum, where I brought a group of my students who, it was the first university approved event to be able to be face-to-face. And with a group of theater students, they were desperate to meet and see other people in real life. They had had enough of Zoom. And I said, "Come play with me. I want you to help be the cast of characters that are going to absolutely terrify a bunch of medical providers who are heading into the field. And we're going to create together a giant transit." Within that group of students, there were makeup artists. There were some that are absolutely terrified of both performing and makeup, who are better at doing these sort of logistical things. And in that first year, we sort of making some kind of impact. And my collaborators at TTUHSC said, "We scared the pants off of everybody," because my students could understand what it meant to be in a traumatizing situation, or convey that. We don't like to traumatize our theater students that much, and brought a sense of reality to a simulation that was otherwise usually pretty tame. And that the feedback was able to be seen, or the impact to those providers right on the front lines of COVID-19 with that next sort of training. The project developed a little bit further to include a larger partnership that also now folds in the TTU Vet School, as well as we partner with the Lubbock Emergency Management and several other institutions in the area to produce a series of complex exercises, all which are simulation-based, in which theater practitioners wander into these spaces to help bring a sense of reality and grounding to these particular events. We moved on from tornadoes to now a wildfire. And we also do substance use disorder treatment and destigmatizing substance use in a clinical setting, as well as focusing on what it means to connect medical communities to families in times when their loved ones may have been wrongfully killed due to a medical accident. And so my students oftentimes, and on any given exercise, I typically have a team of about 60 students from TTU as well as area institutions that come along and sort of help execute, if you will, these different exercises. Moving forward, I'm excited to post that this series of projects also will be the source of some property that helps to further this type of training, because within this, each time my student groups interact with a group of medical providers, another relationship is born, and it creates another potentiation or possibility for those students to go create that same exercise or experience somewhere else. And what I've come to find in doing this again, this is in its fourth year of happening, is that among the list of relationships growing, we're also seeing, as well as the possible impacts, which with this one, there is direct community engagement. Usually it's interdisciplinary community engagement. However, the city of Lubbock became really familiar with the work that Tech was doing and brought us out to help sort of simulate surge capacity at the local area emergency rooms. So said for a large scale active shooter drill last, I think, a year and a half ago. And so my students were integrating into the community, playing usually bloody messes and scaring the heck out of all 6 major ERs in the area, and using both their craft to demonstrate the power of community. But on the flip side of that, a part that underscores this that's critical is every narrative that's created. Each patient has an identity, a story, and usually a purpose within the overall context of the exercise. It's my students going out and connecting to community to hear those stories and to understand the lived experiences of the people in those contexts and how that reaction can be made real by deeply embedding in an engaged relationship. So that's also, and these are sort of the scope of exercise in terms of the different types of roles that are integrated from my research side, in addition to the many that are served within the context of simulation. And here's the bloody mess part. So it all's cherry flavored, usually hypoallergenic. You don't like peanuts. But the thing that has been really fascinating is the ability for these things to expand. I am so grateful to have really dedicated partners at TTU-HSC interprofessional education, because they're always looking for some way to use this type of training modality. But they're also generous in saying, hey, if this is working for us, in connecting me to some additional, facets or places that could use this type of training. But also with that idea of having possibility at the forefront, I sort of keep my eyes peeled for ways that I can help my students practice their craft, but in an applied setting that helps them to understand that it's not just on film or on stage or in print, that their work can be made meaningful, but that they can use what they do to also help change sort of the social narratives or whatever the training goals might be. So there's an application that is for fire. Let's say set a fake fire. That's pretty exciting. As well as mass casualty training. I'm hoping that I get to work with the airport this next triennial in terms of simulating the victims and that are responded to in the simulated plane crash. As well as I've done other mass casualty exercises that are DoD adjacent. There's an application for this type of work in law enforcement, particularly I know Lubbock Police Department has said, hey, we would love for your students to come play criminals, which is always a fun assignment to sort of give them, as well as to do other sort of exercises in order to have that first live contact and scenario, which may become the reality of the officers and other personnel. Anti-drunk driving campaigns. So sometimes I send out a makeup artist to do some of the additional spectacle, knowing that by what looks like fun for a moment, splashing a little bit of blood on, one of the homecoming queen, that perhaps it can make another demonstrable impact to the future lives of those seeing it. I also do immersive total patient management training exercises, which are much more complex and usually have sort of multimodal or multi-stage sort of facets that interact with different social services and other parts of the community. As well as, there's a couple other things that we can do. And really, this all started with that idea of possibility, but also thinking about the only limits, I believe, besides needing a clone and maybe an assistant in a research lab, is the imagination. And within envisioning how we sustain our community partnerships, our relationships, and even the life cycles of our projects, it's critical to continually imagine, have conversations about, share generously of what you have, but also know that it's just a matter of time before you'll bump into someone and unexpectedly create something really wonderful and good. So I like to say, in terms of outreach and engagement, my students and I get caught red-handed with collaborators, and oftentimes our hands are stained that color. But it's really been a joy at Texas Tech to demonstrate how theater can help save lives.
Thank you, Mallory. I appreciate your presentation on Disaster Day, immersive disaster response training series and simulations. And as you learned from Mallory, how she connected her narrative or her life story to maybe improving and maybe even saving lives in the community. Let's listen to Paulina. Dr. Velez is an assistant professor in the College of Health and Human Sciences at Texas Tech. She serves as an adjunct faculty for the Center for Adolescent Resiliency. Her research focuses on understanding the factors associated with healthy development trajectories in youth from different socio-cultural backgrounds. In addition, she's interested in translating this research into designing and evaluating programs and services that can help young people navigate adolescence in healthy ways. Her presentation is titled Initiating, Building, and Maintaining Community Partnerships, Insights from 2 Engage Scholarship Projects. Paulina.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being so impressed and so interested in that work. I'm going to share with you some insights of what I have learned in terms of initiating, building, and maintaining collaborations with community partners. And I'm going to draw from some of the experience that I have had building a collaboration with a local community organization, the Guadalupe Parkway Neighborhood Center, which is located in East Lubbock. This collaboration started very recently, summer of 2023. But I'm also going to tell you a little bit about a collaboration that has been happening for 10 years now. It's an international project that started with a specific project aiming at adopting a positive youth development program for youth in Colombia. It has grown into different projects, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that throughout this presentation. So I would like to start with these questions for you. I think that when we are thinking about engaged scholarship, engaged teaching, we need to ask ourselves these questions. What motivates you to do engaged scholarship and or teaching? What are your professional and also personal goals to do this? And how do these two align, those motivations with your goals? What are the communities or community that you want to work with? And how does your goals for engaged scholarship and teaching fall within the mission of your institution? In this case, we're very lucky because our institution, Texas Tech, does support this mission, and it's increasingly adding more resources for us to continue doing this kind of job. And what institutional support do you have to establish those new partnerships? Some community partnerships can start as a result of some more logical steps but others, as Mallory said, can start more of what I call, and this is not a term that I created, but one of my colleagues used it, and I like to use it now to explain this, what we call serendipity or happy accidents. So if we're following a more logical step towards establishing a community partnership, you can see how you start defining your goals, your aspirations, you move into identifying which communities can I work with to meet those goals, to meet those aspirations. And it might be that you already have some organizations in mind, or you have interacted with some of them in an informal or more formal context, but they can also come from colleagues that point us towards some of those organizations. That had happened to me with Anish, who has told me, have you heard about them? Do you know about them? It can start as a conversation. Once you identify them, you might want to find those gatekeepers. And this is a term that it's used in qualitative research, and it means find the person who can help you get access to that community. It might not be the director where you need to go straight, or a representative or a staff. It might be someone from that community that will give you some ideas of the best way to approach those organizations. After you have established that, you engage in conversations, you start understanding what that community organization does and their goals and their aspirations, and you identify those shared goals and start working from there and define then a plan of action. So that looks simple, and in some ways it can go very well. You know, there were other times, but also, and I'm gonna share you some examples. Some of these things will happen as a result of serendipity. Let me tell you about that partnership with Guadalupe Parkway. And this one to me followed a more logical flow. So my last academic year, 2023-2024, I participated in a program offered by the Office of Outreach and Engagement that was the Faculty Fellows in Engaged Scholarship, where we had young faculty or in early career faculty paired with a mentor to know and to grow in our engaged scholarship activities. So I was one of the members of the mentee cohort, and the office organized a community bus tour throughout Lubbock, visiting different community organizations to get us exposed to those organizations who wanted to work with the university, with their faculty, with our faculty and staff. So I call it kind of a matchmaking process. Here they are. Do you like them or not, right? And interestingly, I had been, as a graduate student, I did my PhD here in Texas Tech. I was involved with some projects in East Lubbock, but I never had the opportunity to meet Guadalupe Parkway. And when I was listening to what they were saying about the programs that they have for youth in their community, I was like, why didn't I meet them before? So it was great. But serendipity was also involved, because as we were getting the orientation and the director was presenting us their program, all of a sudden she shared a story about her Colombian granddaughter. And I'm like, whoa, Colombian in Lubbock. I am from Colombia, and there's not a lot of Colombian in here. So are you? Wow, see, another serendipity event. So I was very excited to see that. And I'm like, I need to ask her. And that's what started more informal conversations. And I'm like, what? You said you have a Colombian granddaughter. What does it mean? So we started a more informal conversation, but that was followed with more structured meetings. I told them about my teaching, about my research interest. The Office of Outreach and Engagement, Anish in particular, helped me with those initial meetings and how we were going to establish that collaboration. And we started identifying what were those shared interests, common goals, and opportunities for collaboration. Now, the one in Colombia was more deeply serendipitous. I am telling you, it's a collaboration with a university, and you might say, well, a university might not really be a community partner. It is and it is not. But in this case, it was the university who got, or our faculty collaborator in the university who really gave us access to community organizations like public and private schools and other organizations who were working with until today. It started as in a casual meeting, in a professional conference back in 2014. And I was a graduate student back then, presenting some of my preliminary work for my dissertation. And so this is very encouraging to see. Some of you might be graduate students that are interested. You can start this. You need to be a faculty member or staff. You can start if you have a shared interest in this to start this going. So I met two colleagues who are now my collaborators in this project. Dr. Sarah Dodd, who's here at Texas Tech, works in the same college as I do, and Dr. Nadia Morato from Colombia. And the three of us attended that conference, but we didn't know that we were attending. We just met there. And it was so interesting because even though I was working in the college, I was doing my PhD in the College of Human Sciences, now Health and Human Sciences. I didn't know Dr. Dodd before, and it was just in that conference that I got to meet her and got to know about what she is the executive director for the Center for Adolescent Resiliency. And I'm like, what? You have such a center like that? And I've never heard about it. And then I got to see Nadia, who was my instructor when I was an undergraduate student. And it was just like, this conference brought us together. We were there for separate purposes, but that started a conversation. What are you doing? So good to see. What are your interests? And we started to talk about that. And we found that we had a common goal to understand what healthy adolescent development means in different cultures and in different contexts. And that was guided by authentic curiosity or engaged scholarship. We knew we wanted to work with the communities in Brotherhood, in Colombia, and that's what started that. Are more informal. Now, as we move on to building those relationships, I'd like to share some of my experiences and insights. And learn to be comfortable with going slowly but surely. This means that some things are not going to move when you're building these collaborations. They might not move at the pace that you want them to go. And I'm going to share quickly an example with my student Irina here. Yeah, last week we're starting a new collaboration with the food bank, and it's moving like that. And I was telling her, like, don't get very excited. That might not happen all the time. Some of them are slowly, but the idea is that you are going to go at the pace that it needs to be. Protect and nurture the trust that you need to build with the community and the community organization. Try not to impose your academic agenda. Like you shared, as faculty, we need to publish, we need to get grants, we need to have some annual evaluations, and we want to show that we're being productive and really this is helping and we're doing academic work. But if we try to impose that academic agenda, that's not maybe going to fit well with your community organization. So sometimes you need to balance that. Find those mutually beneficial goals. What is it that you can bring to the table? What are they bringing to the table? And how can we grow together? Listen, and always listen. Sometimes needs or aspirations of that community might not be evident in your first conversations, but if you engage in active listening, you might identify things that could later on turn into a project. Understand the culture of the organization, how they operate, and also the perceptions of the university or higher education institutions in the community. Unfortunately, there are some misperceptions, and some communities and community organizations are a little bit more reluctant to work with higher educations. Others are very eager and open. So understand where you're coming to in that relationship. In the case of Universidad CES, that was a benefit for us because it has, like, the community really look up to that institution and they're very willing to participate and collaborate in projects. But that's not always the case. Now, how did the partnership with Guadalupe Parkway Neighborhood Center unfolded? So after that informal conversation, we had some more formal meetings in the fall of 2023, and they shared with me that they had just received some funding to do a needs assessment in the community to develop and to evaluate programs for middle and high school kids. So far, they had been working mostly with younger kids. And so that really was a good fit with my area of research and my interest. And they were very interested that I had that experience in program development and evaluation. So it was a good fit. And also on fall semester, I was going to start offering a course in developing and evaluating youth programs. And I wanted to do it as a community engaged teaching and learning course. It's also known as service learning courses. But so it all seemed very good. But I wasn't able to offer that course in the spring semester. There was low enrollment, so that kind of threw our plan of how we were gonna work on that needs assessment. And the conversation kind of like stopped for a little bit. We were trying to find how to do things, but I was really at that point a little sad that it was not working. But here's the example of the active listening. Late in March, a colleague from my department also came to me with a solicitation from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention that was calling for proposals for programs for children and youth that had incarcerated parents. So the key to these was that it required a community organization as a primary applicant. So it couldn't be us and the university. It needed to be a community organization. And that active listening that I had been doing with Guadalupe Parkway, they never expressed explicitly that that was a challenge in their community, but by some more informal conversations, I thought I think this would be a great fit for this organization. We had 1 month to put that proposal together. I was a little bit, I don't know, hesitant that they were gonna say, yes, let's do this. I presented the opportunity. They were on board. We had to navigate a lot of things that I'm not gonna go into further details, but that really spoke to me as we have been building this relationship to a point that there is trust and that they know, even though we need to put together this in was probably 4 weeks, they were on board. So that to me was itself a milestone, like knowing that they trusted us and they trusted that this could be. We should be hearing from the solicitation this month, so I'll follow up. The one with CES, as I told you, is a law. It has been going on for more than 10 years now, started informally. Then we have had the opportunity, my colleague Sarah Dodd and I, to go to Colombia, did some needs assessment, pilot of the program that we wanted to adopt. And then COVID came, we had to pause that a little bit, but we used it to write more grants, to write manuscripts. Then we have also had our collaborator from Colombia visit Lubbock into opportunities. And that adapting phase has finished, but we have now 2 new projects and they are developing. So it's something that continues to develop and grow. Finally, maintaining good communication. And these are some insights that I have learned. It might work for you, it might not. You need to find kind of what works better for you. Have a coffee, have a muffin, have a donut. Engage in face-to-face conversations. They are very important for strengthening relationships. That's not always possible. That's not something that we could do anytime with our colleagues in Colombia, but we try to keep them going, even if it is by Zoom, by Teams, WhatsApp. Follow up your meetings with written communication. So you had your spoken communication, but follow up so you can summarize what you discussed and also make sure that you have some documentation of who is going to do what, when, and where. If your partners are comfortable, use text messages or WhatsApp. Internationally, we use WhatsApp a lot. And this was very important for when we were writing the grant with Guadalupe Parkway, because we needed immediate information. I need this from you for the application. And if we were waiting to have a more formal email, that could have delayed the process. But it could also be a good way where some key informants from that community might give you some insights that maybe wouldn't come up in a formal conversation. So use that if that is a possibility to you. Some final thoughts, some collaborations, as you saw from these 2 stories, can emerge more organically, such as the ones that are facilitated through our Office of Outreach and Engagement. Take advantage of those opportunities. Building relationships can take you a long way. And I think we can see that in our project with Colombia, where we keep going and going for new projects. make sure to nurture them consistently, but also authentically. It needs to be an authentic commitment. Just like in any journey, there are gonna be missteps, mishaps, and other unexpected events, but you will find the ways to work through them. And I'd like to leave you with a quote that is actually on the website of Guadalupe Parkway. It's a message from the director that says, "The universe conspires to assist us when we reveal our dreams." To me, that's what I was trying to tell you about serendipity. If you know what you want, what motivates you, what drives you, and you make it, you tell it to the world, you will find the ways to be able to engage in that. So that's all I had for today. Thank you very much.
How interesting is that, right? Coffee, muffins, and donuts can lead to changes, not just in the communities around you, but communities in the world across our campuses. And that's something we were seeing in our offices, that we work with collaborations with communities, not just in Lubbock, Texas, but we're handling projects in Turkey, in India, in Colombia, from all over the world. So wherever you come from, you have a story, you have a narrative, you want to share your goodwill and your heart back home. Join us in this office and we'd love to connect you. We're going to open up the floor for questions that you may have for Paulina and also for Mallory about how these connections have helped them and also how they can help you and the power of community impact and building connections. So let me open this up for you. And before you all leave, I'm going to explain to you all some of the resources which are on your table and how you can continue to keep in touch with our offices and how we can help you continue building your community impact. Any questions for our speakers?
We wanted to do something kind of cool to model what Paulina was talking about, which is, so the other day, it was first Friday, and I was drawing a big rooster for a gal named Dela, who's the director at the Guadalupe Parkway. And she comes up to me and she says, "I'm interested in having some theater people come over and do theatery things." And we do have an engaged course in the school of theater and dance. And I actually need to talk to you about structuring relationships in a way that sort of speaks to some of your research agendas. So we need to get a donut. So I thought it would be a fun moment to show you all of like how sometimes these things begin.
Do you have any questions on this?
Actually, yes, we just can't see you.
Oh,
All right, so let me get kick started with a question for both of you. What do you think has contributed to your sustained collaboration with the communities? It's taken weeks, years, and sometimes even a decade in your case. What has been that significant constant factor that has made you want to chase these community collaborations?
Well, I think those first questions that I presented you, it's my motivation in this kind of work that has kept me going. Also the way that I believe in this work, I believe that it can have an impact. So if you do believe that, you find the ways. I believe that building relationships authentically is very important, and when you nurture those relationships, that is going to facilitate that you can sustain something that might have started as an idea, but can develop into meaningful and impactful work.
I think that part of what sustained my research is the willingness for my collaborators and I to continuously evaluate what the work is and identify what is successful. So the model becomes increasingly efficient on the back end. And that leaves time that the next time we approach another event or another idea that there is room for it. And so I think that also thinking about what you're doing, sometimes it does expand so quickly and there's not enough of you to sort of contain it. And likewise, if it's an idea that has enough sort of impact, there's going to be more demand for it, is to constantly reassess so that you are ensuring that what you are able to deliver an excellent product and an excellent relationship and connection, one that prioritizes listening, is always able to stay in the forefront, because that's really the core of the integrity of that relationship and what then can grow additional opportunity as well.
Are there any students in the room? Any students studying on this campus? Are there any faculty in the room? Are there any staff in the room? All right, that's awesome. So we have a mix of all three. We have students, faculty, and staff, right? Each one of us, I believe, is trying to build our resume for a certain purpose. It could be a job, it could be a promotion, it could be both, it could just be calling that back home and saying, hey, I made it, right? But how can these collaborations help us as students, faculty, and staff to advance not just our personal resumes, but also make the resumes of the community look even more beautiful and more peaceful? If you could talk to the students, faculty, and staff in the room, so all three of us can listen to the benefit to each.
I think that as a student, faculty, staff, you can find projects that could lead to some outcomes. In our case, those have been presentations, publications, grants, applications. They're not always easy to find, but you can find them and you have resources at the institution to do that. But I wanted to answer that. How do we're not only building our resumes or curriculum or CV, I'm sorry, but also the organization. That example that I gave you of this grant that we work with Guadalupe Parkway, they had never applied by themselves to a federally funded grant. I had to create their SAMS account, their grants.gov account. I had access to all of their passwords because they were like, I cannot access. So they trusted that, but you build capacity with them. They are more likely to don't feel intimidated the next time that there's something that is for a community organization. So they already have these numbers and these things that they have to have set up. They feel that they can do it and navigate them. So they're also building that capacity to get more funding from sources that they maybe didn't consider before because they look like a little intimidating. So
I like this idea of community resume building. I think it's very critical, and it's definitely part of responsible research practice to really collect some data in while you're working on a project. And in the case of my research, there is both qualitative and quantitative to sort of contain scope of impact. But also for me, listening to the data or listening to the community and hearing that the impact is good, beneficial, and that you are contributing to growth. So ensuring that the narrative and the relationship that you've created is one that is enriching on both sides, and also assessing, much as Paulina suggested in her presentation, like what are those goals, and then like what's the next thing that you can do together, knowing that foundationally when you've created that sort of bond, that you've become a team in many ways. And so the sort of like connection back to what it is that you're doing at the institution, of course, it could reap rewards or additional funding, etc. Likewise, there should be a similar sort of impact of enrichment within the community environment. And I always like to say too that no matter how you're making that outreach, and for me for a while, outreach and engagement were like, what's the difference? I don't understand what that is. But it begins as that handshake and that introduction and getting to know people and perhaps giving them something and then leaving, and then it's a one-time thing. But when you really reach the state of engagement and approaching meeting new people and communities as I really want to find some way we can connect and work together, that sort of changes the way that you approach any opportunity that you come into contact with. And so, and I'm grateful for things like this, for example, because to me, this is the sparky moment that begins a lot of those engaged type partnerships that can then yield that sort of resume for community.
Speaking also from personal experiences, I came here as an international student on this campus, and just engaging with the communities helped me to meet the Office of Outreach and Engagement and eventually get a job on this campus. I went as a guest speaker to speak about my experiences with the community and ended up meeting my wife, and now we're married, So if nothing else, it might just get you a wife. but absolutely, the impact that I see about community connections is special, whether you look at it from the angle of a student, a faculty, or a staff. And if you still want to understand how this can be incubated and incorporated into your resume, feel free to reach out to us in the Office of Outreach and Engagement, which actually brings me back to a question which was asked for you both is, it takes time, right? You experience hurdles on the way. You experience roadblocks, which are on both sides, on campus and off campus. What is your advice to us when we're stepping out to connect with the community on navigating and maneuvering past these possible roadblocks? And what does the end result look like when you actually cross it?
For me, that speaks to sort of inner work in many ways, because I'm naturally a persistent person, so I see a challenge and then I'm like, how can I get around that? But you know, in the case of, for example, a global pandemic, I think that having a willingness and mobility to adjust what it is that you're wanting to do to fit the format, the need, et cetera, speaks to a way to really meaningfully connect with community. I mean, there's always a danger of imposing what you want to do onto someone, and to really be willing to pivot and adjust, be flexible, and let that expand your creativity, or whatever maybe your initial questions become even larger as a result of that, is something that I think, like, if that's a space you occupy, like outreach and engagement might just be what you do, because that speaks to a desire to sort of contribute, sort of outside of where you're standing.
I agree with you, and you need to find ways to overcome those challenges. But again, I go back to this idea: if you're intrinsically motivated to do that, you will be more open to find it, be resourceful, be creative. We also had some throwbacks during COVID, because that's when we were going to pilot the program in Colombia. Obviously, we couldn't, but that gave us more ideas for let's write, let's look for new projects, let's new for ways to keep this going on despite not being able to do what we originally intended. So I think also, if you have built that relationship, you're not on your own to kind of find those ways to go about those drawbacks. You work and say, hey, this is not working. What ideas do you have? Let's think about something else. So really working with your partners can help you too.
Yeah. Do you all have any questions for them on connections with the community, or how it can help build not just your space, but also the spaces around you? Ma'am.
Hearing both of your presentations, I can only imagine that your community's gotten bigger, not just here, but I'm thinking about all the presentations you've probably done and those kinds of things. So kind of talk about how that I can see both of yours projects being role models. Does that make sense? Modeling somewhere else, but because people are going, I want to do what they're doing. Does that make sense? So have you seen that yourselves and so forth, and looking at not just what is happening here in the community, but others going, you know what, I'd like to do that in my community as well?
That's an interesting question. Just as a researcher, and partly it's a response to my home craft of costuming, the show always goes on. So we build structures and things in ways that we know we may have to hand it off to someone else to continue the life cycle. And so with this particular series of projects, it's one that's built as an example with the intent to hand it off and make it something that's accessible and implantable almost anywhere. Because to me, that there's such a value to community, to the training aspect, et cetera, that I think that oftentimes that's how it's gotten out of hand. Because it's like, oh, it's so big, now I can't, now I have to pass it off, and I think that there's that sense of putting that in place in your considerations of what it is you are building or wanting to contribute as well. That means that you're not just doing something that's awesome and that connects and creates that relationship, but that's something that can live beyond you, which is really, I think, many times our goal. Yeah, so my projects are just that. I could step away, maybe. I can't. I'll be like, oh, it's bloody enough. But hopefully someone will pick it up.
I just thought about an example with your question, and it's like I mentioned that with the collaboration with TES, it is moving into 2 new projects. So one of them is we're trying to figure out at this stage what are the programming needs of youth in rural communities. And it started because I was sharing with a colleague from agricultural education about the project we were doing with youth in Colombia, but this was more for urban areas. And she's like, so what have you thought about moving this into a rural area, especially those that have been impacted with the armed conflict? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. And she's like, let's do it. And this summer I was collecting data for that needs assessment. So yeah, it kind of sparks some, and that's when you feel like rewarding. It might not have like an immediate check mark on your resume, but it could lead into very interesting things. Thank you.
So what we're trying to basically speak to you about is creating that broader impact in our community, right? How do we impact the lives around us in a way which is broader than just the scopes that we've thought of? Coming back to what Mallory said when she walked into the room, each of us have a narrative. Each of us have a story. How do we convert that story into a story for the communities and actually leave behind a legacy even way after we're gone? And if you look at your desk, we have a workshop coming up called the Broader Impacts series called Understanding Broader Impacts. It's a 3-series workshop. So step 1 is, what is broader impact? How can we make a broader impact in the community, whether we are a faculty, student, and staff, and how we can build that into our personal goals. The second part of this workshop, so you got to attend the first one to be eligible for the second one, is the Broader Impacts Incubator, where you get an opportunity to meet with some of us in our office and say, hey, this is how I wish to create a broader impact in my community. How can you all as an office help me to make that difference? And then the third one, which will happen maybe in spring next year, will be an evaluation piece where you can actually evaluate your broader impact. Similarly, you'll also see more opportunities for you to engage with our Lunch and Learn series, which is on your desk. So feel free to scan these. I guess this will also be sent out to you all. Yeah, so you'll get an opportunity to scan that too. But before we leave y'all and before we let you go on to your amazing lives and continue to impact the communities that you all reach out to, do you all have any take-home messages for our audience in the room on why this can impact both sides of this fence, which we want to break down and make it one big fence? Yeah.
And then to say that if you're not doing it already, challenge yourself to go eat donuts with strangers. And also, I think that one of the reasons I'm here at Tech is that the work being done is so meaningful that whether you realize it or not, most work is either an extension of outreach or engagement. And so understanding the depth of your impact and taking a moment to even pay a little bit of appreciation to yourselves for making that happen, I think is critical.
Let's give both of them a big round of applause. One last resource on the table. This talks to you about our office and how we can continue to work with you. Let's also give the Office of Outreach and Engagement a big round of applause for putting this together.